Welcome back, my fellow Zambians, to the 7th of our weekly conversations. Tonight, we speak of something difficult, of a wound still open in the body of our nation, and of the forgiveness that could yet make us one people again. Good evening, Your Excellency, President Hakainde Hichilema. Good evening, my fellow Zambians. Tonight, we speak of our 6th Republican President, Mr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu, who died a year ago and has still not been laid to rest. And tonight, we speak above all of reconciliation. On the 5th of June last year, former President Edgar Lungu died in Pretoria, aged 68. Your Excellency, you declared national mourning. But within days, the parting became a dispute. The family declined a state funeral. The matter went to court, and it traveled all the way to the Supreme Court of Appeal of South Africa. On the 23rd of June this year, the court ruled in favor of the family, holding that the decision on how and where the former president is laid to rest belongs to them. Your government, through the Attorney General, said that although it did not agree with the judgment, it would respect it and would not appeal any further. The legal road has now reached its end. And yet, even with the law settled, the body has not been buried and the wound in the nation has not closed. This tells us something we must not look away from. The law has spoken, and the law was never going to heal us. That work belongs to people. And among people, it begins with leaders. Let me be honest, Mr. President, because honesty is the ground on which any true reconciliation is built. Many Zambians carry hard memories of the years when President Lungu was in charge of this country between 2015 and 2021. Others carry hard memories of the years that came after Edgar Lungu left office. Reconciliation does not ask us to pretend the pain away. It asks us to refuse to let the pain have the last word. There is a code, a way of doing things in our country, a code that is older than any administration. When a Zambian dies, and especially one who carried the office of president, we clothe them in death with dignity, whether or not they wore it in life. This is not the denial of history. It is the discipline of our culture. And here is the quiet beauty of it. Grace is most powerful and most healing precisely when it is offered across a divide. Anyone can be gracious to a friend or family member. It is the leader who is gracious to a former rival who is remembered for generations as a true ancestor of the nation. Let us check the country's pulse, Mr. President. 3 voices tonight They will not speak. You and I will listen. The first is the Lungu family. I will not speak for them. I will only say, with the hope that the softer side of your heart hears this, that no family should have to grieve through a court, and that whatever the politics of the late president's life, the grief his widow and children carry now is pure and human, and it deserves a pure and human response. The second is Lamek Tembo, who once stood in the crowds for the late president in Chawama. He did not love your administration, and he did love Edgar Lungu. He is asking simply when his president will be allowed to rest in peace. The third is Mazuva Hamonga, a young woman in Monze who voted for you with hope. She's not asking about the courts. She's asking whether the Zambia she voted for can become a country that heals its own quarrels, able to be one people again. Mr. President, I know that you, as a man of scripture, know a man who knew what you know. This man is David. David was hunted by King Saul for years. Saul threw spears at him, chased him through the wilderness, tried again and again to take his life. If any man had earned the right to rejoice at a rival's death, it was David. And when the news came that Saul had fallen on the mountains of Gilboa, David did not rejoice. He tore his clothes. He wept. He fasted until evening. And he made the song of lament, how the mighty have fallen for the very king who had hunted him. David commanded that it be taught to the people so that the nation would mourn its dead king with dignity. David understood something this country needs to understand again. The office of a leader carries a dignity that outlives the man, and even outlives our quarrels with the man. To dishonor the fallen king is to dishonor the throne itself, the very throne you sit on. Mr. President, let us look at what our recurring theme says this week. Tend my sheep. This means to look after even the sheep that wandered, even the one you argued with. The shepherd does not leave a single body on the mountain, not even the body of the ram that once battered him. He brings it home and he lays it to rest with honor, because that is what shepherds do. Let me bring this leadership responsibility closer home, from the soil of our own country in living memory. As I have mentioned before, Mr. President, I served as an advisor to the third president, the late Levi Patrick Mwanawasa. In those years, his government had taken his own predecessor, President Frederick Chiluba, to court on charges of corruption. The two men were not seen eye to eye. The case was real, and it was hard. Then word reached State House that the former president was seriously unwell. Without a moment of hesitation, President Mwanawasa asked a few of us on his team to accompany him, and together we went to see former President Frederick Chiluba at his home. I must confess, I was taken aback. Given all that stood between the two men, I did not expect such a decision. But we went with him. And when President Mwanawasa stood there, greeting the frail former head of state, he said, "Mr. President, I did not know that you were this unwell. I'm terribly sorry." Then they sat together and talked. Sooner rather than later, the former president was flown to South Africa for medical attention. Mwanawasa repeated the same gesture with former President Michael Sata. When we returned to State House after visiting Mr. Chiluba, I sought audience with President Mwanawasa. I said to him, "Your Excellency, I have a question, and please feel free not to answer if it sounds silly. Kindly help me understand. Your government has taken the former president to court, yet the moment you heard he was unwell, you took us with you to see him without hesitation. How does one explain that?" President Mwanawasa looked at me and said, "Martin, you are confusing two things. When the government takes a suspected case of corruption to court, it is doing only what the law requires. There is no sacred cow in the fight against corruption." He continued, "It does not please me that my government must take my own former boss to court, but the law is the law. You are confusing that with something else entirely. Mr. Frederick Chiluba is a former president of Zambia. He served this country in its highest office for 10 years. It is my duty on behalf of the nation to see that such a man is cared for. In my mind, there is no contradiction. The court case can run its course, and I will carry out my duty to a man who served his country." President Mwanawasa then concluded, "In my mind, I wish him well. I wish him good health." That answer, Mr. President, will stay with me for the rest of my life. Here was a leader who could hold the law in one hand and love in the other, and let neither cancel the other. For him, following the law was never in contest with caring for a fellow human being. The two simply lived on different shelves of the same heart. This, Mr. President, is the very shape of reconciliation. Not the forgetting of wrong, but the refusal to let wrong harden our hearts against one another. Mr. President, permit me to speak to what you and I know is the higher freedom. The courts have now done their work, Mr. President, and we honor them. For the law is the floor that keeps any of us from falling through the cracks. But the law is only the least we owe one another. It is never the highest thing we are capable of. The highest thing is love, and the doorway into love is forgiveness. When Nelson Mandela walked free after 27 years in prison, President Bill Clinton once asked him whether, on that day, he had hated the men who had locked him away. Mandela answered honestly. The old anger and fear did rise up, he admitted. And then he said this: I knew that if I continued to hate them as I drove away from the gate, they would still have me. I wanted to be free. And so I let it go. Mr. President, kindly hear what Madiba understood. Forgiveness is not first a gift to the one who is forgiven. It is first the freedom of the one who was wronged. Whoever refuses to forgive stays tied to the person who hurt them, dragged wherever that old wound leads, a prisoner long after the prison doors have opened. To forgive is to walk out of that cell. It is to refuse to let the one who wronged you keep you for a single day longer. And you, Mr. President, as an elder of the church, know that this is not merely wisdom. It is the way of our Lord who said, "Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends." He taught that if you bring your gift to the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Reconciliation, that man from Nazareth said, comes before the offering. And he blessed the peacemakers above all others, calling them the children of God. My fellow Zambians, this word is not for the president alone. It is for every one of us. In the long fight for power, we have wounded one another and called each other names, names that no sister or brother should call a sister or brother. Many of us still carry our grievances like stones in our pockets, heavier with every passing year. Let us set the stones down, not because the hurt was not real, for it was real, but because we wish to be free and because we wish to be one. A house divided against itself, we have heard so many times, cannot stand. A nation divided against itself cannot rise. Mr. President, your government has already taken one quiet step of grace in choosing to accept the court's ruling rather than fight on. It honored the family's right to decide. I do not pass over that. It was right, and it was not nothing. But there is a larger grace that no court order and no government decision can ever produce. It can come only from you, Mr. President, as a person, as a leader, and as a brother in faith. My plea, Your Excellency, is that you reach out to the Lungu family, not to be seen, but to be human. If they will receive you, go the way family comes to those in grief. If they would rather you kept your distance from the funeral itself, honor that completely and bless it from afar. Mr. President, our nation takes its lead from its highest office. If the presidency speaks the language of reconciliation, the country learns to speak it too. Imagine it, Mr. President, a Zambia where we disagree without despising one another, where we contest for power without breaking the bonds that make us one people. You can show us that such a Zambia is possible. You are not only our head of state. You can be a healer. And not on this matter alone, but on the many wounds our country still carries. To close this dialogue, Mr. President, I leave you with a few questions to ponder as you go to sleep. Mr. President, what is the one gesture of grace that only you can offer, that no court could ever command? What odd hurt might you lay down this week and gently invite all of us to lay down with you so that none of us stays its prisoner? Until next week, when we will speak of the opposition and a president for all, hold the following with me, Your Excellency. May we choose forgiveness. May we choose the freedom that forgiveness brings. May we choose one another over being right. May we walk gently together and hold the memory of Edgar Lungu as one people in the pursuit of one Zambia, one nation. May God hold this country with both hands. Good night, Your Excellency. Good night, Zambia.